You're listening in on an animated discussion about Batman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from the cinematropolis.com. And today's topic is the Season 1 episode, Beware the Gray Ghost.
Caleb, let's start as we usually do with the title card.
It's great because now that I know how much this means to you, I actually start taking notes on title card as part of the style.
And it's almost always worth it.
I love it. It's a good visual teaser for what's to come.
When they do it right, it absolutely is. And in this case, I'm going to spotlight a different part of the title card than I usually do. The visual part of this title card is excellent. Don't get me wrong. I love the real obvious mystery man feel of the silhouette and the lantern eyes from the goggles, and he's carrying guns, which is a big difference from Batman. But the thing I love most about this title card is the music.
It is so fun. You're like, oh, we're off on a Cape Crusade.
Exactly. It meshes with the Batman theme. They are obviously by the same composer. There's no doubt in my mind Danny Elfman's responsible, or someone who was very heavily influenced by Danny Elfman. And yet, the BTAS theme is very gothic. It's very serious. It's very down note. And this is probably the same instruments, but it's just played a little higher, a little more verve. This is a little more swashbuckly swinging from rooftop to rooftop than it is, you know, solving grisly murders under broken street lamps.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Joshua. And I'm glad you brought this up because something I noticed upon watching this is just how ridiculously good these scores are, how custom tailored to each episode they are. Like some of these I don't even think we ever hear again, but in the context of that episode, it fits the themes. It's perfect. It's not too complicated, but it really is something I don't feel like I see a lot of on children's television anymore.
No, definitely not. I think that this is a holdover from two things that were going on at this time. I mean, one, this was very obviously Warner Brothers' like flagship animation, and it was coming on the tails of Batman 89, which was scored by Danny Elfman. So I feel like you've got Warner Brothers, the studio, giving them some of the keys. It's so funny to me that they didn't have colors except for the colors from Tiny Toons to work with.
Right.
But because it's Warner Brothers, you can walk down the hall and get into Danny Elfman's cube.
For the next few episodes of this podcast, I'll be spotlighting the music and who did it because I just was so impressed by this and Heart of Ice and Two-Face. I'm like, every episode, man, this is just such a great theme. Like, I could listen to this all day. And this one was put together by a composer named Carl Johnson, and it looks like he's actually worked on a lot of things, not necessarily as a composer, but within music department, things like Wall-E, Magnificent Seven, Skyfall. He's a guy who has clearly gone on to do a lot of really awesome things. But early on in his career, he got to do something really experimental and cool. And again, kind of like classic orchestra sounding.
When I get excited about the opportunities that a studio would give you, like a Warner Brothers studio would give their animation department, I'm thinking of two things that he typifies. One, you've got a stable. Right? Mm-hmm. So you can go get somebody who isn't pitching in the majors yet, but who clearly has some skill, and just bring them in to do this 2-minute piece of instrumentation.
I mean, as a music person who's trying to get a good start, I feel like this is like the perfect, hey, Keys of the Kingdom. You can write this cool theme for this cartoon. It's a cartoon, so it's not like, you know, it's not going to be Oscar nominated or anything. But hey, early on in your career, you get to put together this awesome little theme, and by golly, they did it, like with every episode.
And then we're going to walk down the hall, and an orchestra is going to play it.
Yes.
Not to denigrate a lot of really great theme music that happens from animated shows now, but most of them don't have access to an orchestra.
Right.
We're not going, this is a look in the future and talking about something that really bothers me, but we're not going to get music this good for Justice League.
I mean,
the Justice League music is not good.
I love
it's not
the
terrible.
theme. I love the main theme.
Well, we'll argue about that in 3 years.
I will contend and agree that I can't remember, outside of the main theme, I can't remember a single piece of music off the top of my head. So,
yeah. We are going to talk about the music on some of the other title cards, but it really stood out to me here because it's
just such a big contrast to what we're used to seeing in the other title cards.
And it feels like a thing that could have been a theme for a Gray Ghost cartoon that I would have watched.
Guys, Joshua actually, like when the episode was over, like, okay, Google, where can I find Gray Ghost? Where's that library with all the stock footage? I want to go watch it.
That's a thing from Bruce's flashbacks that I'm watching this Gray Ghost show through his eyes and thinking, I would watch this show.
This is Joshua. This is the show I know you won't have to know. You would watch the hell out of the Gray Ghost.
Yeah.
Every episode. You would have been Bruce Wayne in this scenario.
Yeah, 100%. I would have been sitting there in my my kid's crushed velvet fedora with goggles on, and totally. Absolutely. My Gray Ghost doll gripped in my fist, just like Bruce Wayne. That was so great.
We could talk about the title card all day because I think it really highlights what works about the episode so well. But let's kind of move into the styling on this one, because I really love that this is a tribute and an homage to old school serials that I'm sure Bruce Timm grew up watching, and I'm sure Paul Dini grew up watching, and all these influential creators on the series probably used to watch stuff like The Shadow, right? Like,
yeah.
or listen to those old radio shows.
Yeah.
So this is in a roundabout way is a tribute. Yes, to Adam West, of course, but I would say this is a whole generation further back to pre-Adam West Batman.
Just guessing at how I operated with taking media in, that's probably what those guys were watching as a kid. Were like the serials or Saturday matinee serials from the movie theaters are now showing up on TV. That's what they're getting to watch when they're growing up, in the same way that I grew up watching Batman 66. That's what was given to me in syndication, right? So they were probably getting Zorro and Lone Ranger and probably these kind of awful Batman and Robin serials from the time.
Totally.
Green Hornet, like they're getting that stuff. And it's interesting to watch these guys marry what would have been their influences growing up with what would have been my influences growing up in Adam West. Because when you watch the Gray Ghost cartoon through Bruce's eyes, it's got nothing in common with Batman 66.
Right.
It seems to be taking itself pretty seriously as an adventure show. There's no camp to it. But we're still going to bring Adam West in on this because, by God, the last most famous person to play Batman should get to hang out with the next most famous person to play Batman.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's really cool, and it really does feel like an old timey radio show. And in a lot of ways, I think this is a really early forerunner to this like copycat. I mean, this conversation could go a lot of different directions, but there is like you have this with the Mad Bomber was inspired by this cartoon to go bomb stuff, which is kind of like disturbing. But also on the flip side of that is we get Batman. We get this guy who watched the Gray Ghost and was inspired to go fight crime, which is why I absolutely love the way that it opens with this scene by scene recreation. Mm-hmm. Okay, here's the Gray Ghost, and here's how Batman is doing exactly the same thing. And that might be a little on the nose for some people, but I think it really reinforces the themes and the ideas driving this episode, which is superheroes matter. And
they're not aspirational. They're inspirational. I mean, I have in other arenas made the argument that they're aspirational also, but that's only morally. I want to be morally like Batman or Superman. I can't actually train myself to be the world's greatest crime fighter or be Kryptonian. So I will also argue, like, morally they're aspirational, but this is a place where you can see the inspiration also. Like, you just get filled with this desire to do good by watching these fictional people do good. Yeah, it's metatextual, but to see it in the fiction is really great.
And it goes all the way with it. At first I was like, oh, this is really cute the way they're cutting them together. But then like they basically in the episode, Batman looks at the Gray Ghost and he's like, I used to believe in what you stood for. I was like, dang.
Yeah.
They're addressing this head on. Like, hey, I have done the things I have done because I watched you as a kid. And in large part because I watched you as a kid. I wanted to be like you. And then I found out you're a quack or a washed up actor,
And glimmer of hope at the end. It turns around again.
Sure.
The same line is delivered by Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
You used to be my hero. And then underneath, under his breath, he says, and you still are.
Yeah.
And that is so hot. Like,
so
that is
hot.
just great.
It's fantastic.
And considering how sad the first act of this show is.
Oh, it's rough.
For the Simon Trent Gray Ghost actor.
It's super depressing. Hey, I hate to do this to a lot of people who've played Batman, even Kevin Conroy. Like, this is what he does. He's Batman. And Adam West, too. He did Batman back in 66, and that's really... I mean, he's done some other stuff for sure, but no one else knows him for that stuff. And then whenever you're that guy, no one else wants to cast you for anything that's not Batman. And then if Batman's not hot, then, well, you don't have a job, and all of a sudden you can't pay your rent. And, it's funny because I think a lot of people assume that if you're in the media... you've been on television or what in a movie, that all of a sudden life's just made and hot and grand forever. But it's not the case. He's not making any money because he can't get cast in anything, which is, I think, in a lot of ways, is an actor's worst nightmare, really. Oh, I did one thing really well and people loved it at the time, but then they forgot about it, and then I couldn't get another job because of it.
I read Adam West's autobiography years ago, Back to the Batcave, and he talks a little bit about this. He's still very thankful for that opportunity and that experience, but when I read that was around the time that this episode was coming out, and it's worth remembering when we have recently lost Adam West, and we were all very sad about it.
Yes.
And the Batman 66 was getting a comic book resurgence, as well as available for the first time ever on DVD and Blu-ray. We love this thing again. But for a huge chunk of time, we did not love it, and we did not appreciate Adam West's appearance in it.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and talk about that. I mean, man, there's a lot to talk about here. Because it was funny. I was really excited to rewatch this episode, Joshua, because I knew I was like, oh, this is going to be a fun kind of homage. But the themes and ideas here that hit me upside the head, and actually, again, taking a look at Adam West and Batman, and what do these characters mean to us? And I think it's really interesting because I remember it really hasn't been until very recently that Adam West has been fully appreciated for what he contributed back in 66, because I remember going up, I was like, oh, Batman the Animated Series is great, but everything that came before that, like at least in media, it's just not good. It's dumb. They didn't take it seriously. It was so cheesy and dumb and no one loves it. And then we got Chris Nolan's Batman movies, which again, I like those movies quite a bit, but it was like after that, it was like, okay, we've had our dark Batman, but you know what?
We've done serious.
We've done serious, and it was great, but let's move on. And also, I mean, I'm not very old. I'm still in my 20s. I've got a lot of life ahead of me, but I'll also say, like, and maybe it's just with how the world's shaped up the last few years, it's nice to have superheroes who are just fun. And also heroic and inspirational and heroic. Like, that's very important. Like, I don't need every version of my superhero to be dark, gritty, and realistic, because that's not always the point. Yes, it means something when you can see your superheroes put in a more real-to-life situation, because it helps you kind of wrap your head around how these ideas that we fight every day in the real world can relate to our superheroes. That's important, but not everything needs to be that, because also, outside being pragmatic, you also have to have that inspiration, this shining beacon to inspire you to want to go out and do good, and to see that, hey, we do have a vision for a brighter future, and this is what it looks like. And so I think that both versions of this character are very important, but we've had so much dark Batman. And that's, again, why Zack Snyder's Batman, to see Batman just so nonchalantly killing people is really disheartening.
There is a tension built into the Batman character that has unfortunately far too easily been pulled over into a place where 8th graders are scribbling metal band names on their notebook covers. He is a darker character in many ways, at least in appearance, which is where the contrast with how he really is matters, right? This is why Robin wears bright colors. They're not as bright as they used to be, but they're still pretty bright,
right?
Because that's the mirror. The next generation, the one that gets inspired by Batman, is kind of a middle ground. He also started out fighting literal monsters like vampires and stuff. I mean, he was that weird creature of the night guy. Since then, we've had some really ridiculous examples, more like in the Adam West vein, and I prefer him splitting that difference. I should never see a dark take on Superman.
Because that's not the point of Superman.
It's not the point of Superman. Now, I say that to say that tension does exist in Batman, but when it gets pulled to too goofy, that doesn't always feel super true to the character, but when you pull him too much the other way, you start to sound like an angsty teenager. Like, this is what angsty teenagers thinks are cool. Listen, I get that there is always going to be a group of angsty teenagers that think that thing is cool. I think we can all agree about our angsty teenage years. It's not a timeless cool.
It's not exactly great, guys. I don't know. Just don't go back and read your journals. Or maybe you should and be like, ooh, I think I was wrong about Batman just a little bit, you know?
When this came out, I was literally the person not appreciating Adam West's Batman. I had it when I was a kid and liked it when I was a kid, and now I'm 12, 13, 14, and I want my Batman to be taken seriously, and thank goodness Frank Miller showed up and helped me out with that. I say with only mild irony all these years later. Yeah, so instead, I like this reciprocal inspiration, aspiration. Batman is kind of a fanboy. How much did you love the fact that the Batcave is built after the Grey Ghost's
modeled
headquarters?
Exactly the same way. When he made that, I was like, oh my God, that's fantastic. The guy is a multimillionaire, so what does he do? He actually recreates his hero's hideout as his own. I mean, that's fantastic.
We never saw the Grey Ghosts. It's Simon Trent that recognizes that when he's in the Batcave. We've never seen that I doubt it ever comes up again, ever. But the idea that is on multiple levels Bruce Wayne's inspiration is excellent. It's wonderful. And it makes sense from a meta level when you start looking at Robins who get inspired by Batman in the same way and then grow up and be a different hero.
And that's the thing, too. It's like, why would people be inspired by a guy who just blatantly goes out and kills people? I mean, obviously that exists, but... Well,
yes,
but
yes.
Sadly,
that
it
does
exists. But I mean, generally, are you more inspired by the Punisher, or are you more inspired by someone who actually wants to go out and do good? And maybe that's just my personal preference. Like, I want my heroes, yes, they need to be human and flawed, and I actually loved some darker takes on Batman, but also, like, he is a hero who is inspired by heroes who will go on to inspire other heroes who also want to do good. That's really a really key piece. And again, this is why I'm going to go back to the age-old argument that representation matters. It matters for a lot of things. It's most recently, gender, race, ethnicity have been the big part of the conversation. I agree on all of those things as well. But like, it goes further than that. It's also
ideals.
Represent
ideals.
And this is why I feel like Superman has been just fundamentally underserved for my entire generation.
Yeah.
Like, the animated series did a great job, but not everyone's seen it.
Right. We haven't had that version of Superman available since something like 2003.
Right.
It's been a minute.
Right. I mean, because, my generation's Superman is not the Dick Donner, Richard Donner Superman. Those are great films. I like those movies, but that doesn't speak to the world we live in today. And when our version is Zack Snyder's stoic, doesn't give a shit hero, I'm like, man, this is not Superman, guys. This is not the guy we want to aspire to be as a beacon of hope.
I understand second acts. Second acts are very dark. I get it. We are in the second act of Simon Trent's life right now.
Right.
Which would have been the second act of Adam West's life in real time.
Right.
I get second acts and they should be dark. But at the end, these people inspire us.
Right. We want to have happy endings. And, sometimes to be a great storyteller, not all the endings are going to be happy. But when you're telling superhero stories that are designed to be inspirational, that's a very key thing. Your character's not inspirational if it ends on a really dour note, know? I do want to get back to Adam West before we wrap up the conversation. Over this past summer, it's summer 2017, I actually happened to be in Los Angeles for an event when he passed away. And while I was in town, the city of Los Angeles did a tribute by flashing the bat signal on City Hall.
So great.
It was beautiful. And I was like, well, I've got time. Yeah, sure. I mean, I was on vacation. My event was done. I was like, okay, yeah. It was like less than a mile away from where I was staying. So like, yeah, I'll go walk down there. And something that really reinforces that, God, this is so important. Like, these characters matter. They're these versions of the characters matter. Adam West, what he did mattered. There were thousands of people piled around City Hall. I mean, some people were in Batman costumes. Burt Ward was there. Catwoman.
Was it Julie Newmar?
Julie Newmar was there. Like,
I had to think because there were 3 Catwomen.
There were,
and I guessed the one that was in the latest animated feature.
Yes,
which was Julie Newmar.
But I mean, thousands of people just lined up, crowds and people brought their families, and it was. And they actually got, and then the mayor of Los Angeles actually, he did a really great inspirational speech and talking about like why this character mattered and why it's so important that we continue to put positive examples of heroism out there. It was really beautiful, moving, and it even got the whole crowd singing the da-na-na-na-na.
Nice.
I mean, I didn't know that was possible, but yes, thousands of people in unison with the bat signal on City Hall. It was a really beautiful moment
that would be dangerously close to me being in church at that point. Like, I would be like, I'm having a spiritual moment with Batman.
I'm not going to lie. When I say it is kind of a spiritual moment, when you get what Adam West did and what Batman does is they do transcend. Those ideas transcend one person because they are things that impact millions of people around the world. It's also a way in which we measure our culture and what we value. For that version of Batman, we valued heroism. And yeah, it was corny, it was cheesy, it was fun, but we understood what heroism was. And it was also before we got really jaded about rich people, which, that's another conversation we can have another day. But, like, that was back when it was, he's a guy who's got all this money. He's using it for good things to help people in a really weird, sort of quirky way. But he was helping people.
It's not for nothing that we never hear about Wayne Enterprises in Batman 66, and we always hear about the Wayne Foundation. I don't think that's an accident.
Right.
Like, that shift over time, these things fundamentally change the character. We can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time with Wayne Foundation and Wayne Enterprises. Yeah. But when you only hear about one, they're saying something. Right? Yeah.
My comments on Adam West is he did some amazing stuff and inspirational. So for him to be in this episode was a nice tip of the hat, but also a way to kind of keep his performance in the minds of people like me, who was a child when this episode aired, So I think it's really important. I think he did a great service here. My generation's Batman's really dark and dour, and I'm kind of over it right now. So I hope the next generation goes back to this Adam West. We're like, hey, it's okay to be heroic and light.
Go out during the daytime sometimes, guys. It's fine.
It's okay. It's okay.
I don't think we can stress the amazingness of that turnout for Adam West's departure, because if we had lost him in 1993...
it would have been a blip on the radar.
That's not happening.
No.
If we had lost him in 2010... that's probably not
going to
happening.
happen. Yeah.
It's really been the last 5 years. And I'll tell you that I think in 1993, the creators of the show were actually trying to remind themselves of something.
Right.
Because did you notice who the villain in this episode is modeled
yeah, great.
off of?
Oh, my gosh, great. I forgot. Bruce Timm modeled the Mad Bomber, the guy collecting all of the merchandise, the fanboy. He makes him the bad guy and designed it after himself.
Makes himself visually... I mean... there's no mistaking. He actually shows up. Bruce Timm shows up as various background characters.
This is the most forward, like in the front.
I think this is the most in the forefront of a plot character he shows up as. I don't know that he actually played himself, but I can tell you whoever was playing him was doing a version of Bruce Timm also. Like was caricaturing Bruce Timm both in visual and in the sound. It's him. And he put himself in the villainous place almost as if he was like, okay, just in case this thing takes off, keep in mind, don't become this guy, or whatever that means in terms of making this show.
Well, and it's really interesting because when you draw that parallel, this is Bruce Timm who was given all the toys, right? He was given all the keys to the kingdom by Warner Brothers. He was given all the collector's items and everything he ever wanted to tell these stories. And this, like you said, it's a warning, kind of keeping himself in check, like, oh, I've got this huge responsibility. I don't want to be this guy.
Yeah, so he's saying, I've been given these toys. I don't want to become the guy who gets evil about the toys so that I can have more toys. Guys, can we get Adam West in on this episode?
Yeah, seriously. That's perfect.
In 93, when nobody was ringing Adam West's phone.
The reason this only happens in 2017... it's really interesting just because of how crazy things are out there right now. It's like the whole culture doubled down on, we need a bright savior who is going to help us out of this, more so than it was even 3 years ago.
I think that's 100% accurate. I think it's going to continue that way. I recently heard an interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates, and he was asked about Marvel's Black Panther, because that's a character he's written a lot about. Why are superhero movies so popular right now? And no hesitation, he just said, escape. Escape. We want to believe that one good person can make a big difference. And the honest truth is, that's not typical. It usually needs to be large groups of good people, and if you are a good person, finding that large group of good people can be a Herculean task unto itself.
Right.
So as far as escape, show me the person who chooses to do good and is able to make a huge difference all at once. And as much as I have all kinds of mixed feelings about the DCEU, I think that's why you saw a lot more appreciation broadly for Wonder Woman than you did for some of the other offerings.
Definitely. Yeah.
I mean,
hands down.
I don't want to make any kind of argument for quality or whatever of Man of Steel or Batman versus Superman. But as far as what do the people want to go see, what are people going to get excited about and talk about, what costumes are being sold this year, we're not going to see BVS, Batman and Superman costumes in droves. I'm going to see dozens, if not hundreds, of Wonder Women asking me for candy.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that they painted her as a more inspirational, aspirational character makes a huge difference for that. Because frankly, if I need angry people taking the law into their own hands, that's easy to find. Finding somebody who is good and helpful, much trickier to find.
Completely agree, Josh.
Thank you, Time Capsule 1993's Beware the Gray Ghost.
Oh, Joshua, well, I don't have much more to say about this episode. We could talk all day about our love for superheroes as inspirations, but my big takeaway, again, I've said it like 2 or 3 times, but if you're going to take one thing away from Beware the Gray Ghost, representation matters. If you're a creator, the way you portray these icons really matters, and that's why there is a lot of responsibility on the people who are writing these scripts. And maybe they don't quite realize that this is with the way they are portraying these characters in films and the way they're representing them and the motives they're giving them. Like, these are all Very, very critical. So whenever you're watching a movie or whenever you're writing a character, if you're a creator, think about what do you want to tell the world? What do you want to show them? If you're writing superheroes, hopefully you want them to be inspirational. How can you give them traits that will do that?
Bruce Timm has a message for you from 1993. And Bruce Timm's message is, do not break the toys just to make money so that you can buy and break more toys.
Ooh. Good stuff. Well, Joshua, I think obviously we like the episode quite a bit, but yeah, no brainer. Go watch this episode of Batman the Animated Series if you're doing a rewatch after you've watched Boy the Grey Ghost. What else do you want to read or watch or play, whatever the case? What do you get some other recommendations out there?
I have a couple of recommendations. One of them is going to be a little harder to find, but I stand by it. Not long before I was watching The Grey Ghost the first time, I had discovered old radio shows. And so I had kind of discovered a couple of characters that I didn't know existed before. And one of them that really stuck with me and then became cemented as one of my favorites has a lot of overlap with the Grey Ghost. And it's the Green Hornet. And the reason that the Green Hornet became cemented for me was not the radio shows. It was because Now Comics, now defunct Now Comics, started a line of Green Hornet comics. They turned it into a generational story, which was the first time that had ever been happened. So that's the first Green Hornet was the one that you were listening to on the radio show. The second Green Hornet was the one that was on the show in the 60s. And now we were watching the third Green Hornet grow up and learn to fight crime. And not for nothing, that is also connected to the Lone Ranger. So it actually starts with the Lone Ranger in that family and carries on through the Green Hornet mantle. And it just turned it into a family affair. It became very aspirational, but also kept it pretty gritty and close to the street because that's a Green Hornet thing. And so if you can find them, I would highly recommend basically the entire run of Now Comics 90s Green Hornet series because they had a bunch of miniseries that would look at the 40s Green Hornet or the 60s Green Hornet or whatever. Highly recommended.
Ooh, good classics. I'm going to go look up Green Hornet. I am going to throw a slew of movie recommendations at you. But first and foremost, I'm going to throw the Best Picture winner from, I believe, 2014, 2015. I can't remember which year. Birdman, which stars Michael Keaton. I mean, Michael Keaton also very relevant here. We didn't even mention that. But the movie that in a lot of ways is doing the same thing for Michael Keaton's career where, hey, you were Batman in 89 and 92, and then you just kind of went away for a while. Although he's making a huge resurgence now. But so I'm going to recommend Birdman. It was the Best Picture winner of that year, and it is the story of an actor who was once a pop culture icon with his character Birdman, who falls from grace after like 3 flops with his movies, and he can't get another acting role. Just like
I'm ashamed that I haven't seen this movie. I forgot that it existed, and I need to fix that immediately. So shame on me. Very
similar because it's going to that whole like washed up actor story. Because basically he's trying to make a big return by doing a theater show that has nothing to do with the Birdman character, but it's a very psychological movie with him trying to figure out how can I overcome this Birdman character that I have been so closely associated with, and then it's
topical.
It's
That's
so
on
good.
point. It's on point for Adam West. It's on point for Michael Keaton to a certain extent. We did kind of forget about him after the Batman sequel for a while,
but I know it's Best Picture winner. The film is a little pretentious, but man, guys, it's so freaking good. So I highly recommend that. That one's a little heavy. It's not so heavy that you're depressed. If you want to look at a really dark version of, and like the unhappy ending to Beware the Grey Ghost, look at Darren Aronofsky's film from 2008, The Wrestler. It's very heavy. It is also a guy who was a wrestler who was like an icon who fell from grace and tries to make a comeback. That one's a bummer.
I love The Wrestler so much. Whenever somebody tries to pigeonhole noir fiction into hard-boiled detectives or criminals or something, I go, yeah, but what about The Wrestler?
Yep.
Because The Wrestler is just an incredibly noir picture about a person who's just in over his head in a lot of ways and just keeps trying anyway. And listen, it's Darren Aronofsky. I don't think I'm giving too much away. It doesn't end up happily.
Darren Aronofsky never ends up happily.
Yeah, so that is an unexpected wreck, but it makes a lot of sense with this episode, and I second it.
Awesome. Thank you. And then on a lighter note, I'm going to throw Megamind out there. That was the DreamWorks film. That's a really underrated flick from a couple of years ago. And I don't generally recommend DreamWorks films a lot, but man,
that's a good point.
It's great and sweet. I mean, just again, this idea of like I like it because it reflects on what is the role of superhero in society, and also what is the role of the supervillain in society. I think it does a good subversion there. It does both. I think it does both really well.
Man, that's excellent. That's a good pull.
I'll go ahead and just throw Unbreakable out there because if you want to look at films that are dissecting what the role of the superhero is in society today, even though it came out like in 2002, I think that's a good watch. But I don't want to belabor the point. I think Megamind, Birdman, and The Wrestler are the big ones I want you to take away.
I'm going to swing back for one last recommendation, and it's actually something I make or co-make. Daniel Swenson and I have created a set of Mystery Man adventures in prose that we're very proud of. And although I would not have drawn a direct line between The Gray Ghost and the work that we're doing before I rewatched this episode, it's definitely mixed in there. This is very much us having read a bunch of Shadow novels and read a bunch of The Spider and listened to a bunch of Green Hornet or read Green Hornet comics and trying to do something similar even in that setting. Like we set it in a fictional super New York called Empire City. That's this, vague 1930s. And to your point of representation matters, we are very specifically trying to inject characters into those types of stories in that timeline that would have been neglected at the time. We have an African-American mystery man. We have women.
Doing things back in that era?
Oh, I know.
Man.
Ace reporters. Mystery women. Ooh. Gentlewoman thieves, you might say.
I want to read stories of women doing these things.
Yeah, so even though it's a little bit like turn the spotlight back on me, I have to say that if you, like me, see the Gray Ghost cartoon that Bruce is watching and think, I would watch that cartoon, I might be able to scratch that itch for you with Empire City. You can find them as ebooks right now because we put out a monthly installment as Masks and Mysteries. And if you just kind of want to get a feel for it, you might check out EmpireCityAdventures.com.
Oh, very cool.
Well, that about wraps up this animated discussion. Caleb, where can people go to continue the conversation with you?
Well, you can always find me on Twitter talking about film, television, and all manner of other sorts of pop culture goodness at C Masters Talk. On Twitter, again, that's at letter C Masters Talk. I'm also the editor-in-chief at a film website that specializes in in-depth critique and analysis of film, thecinematropolis.com. And we publish essays on all types of films, good comic book movies, all that good stuff, including some thoughts from my co-host Joshua here. And you can find all of those at thecinematropolis.com. Joshua, what about you?
I'm also most active on Twitter, where you can find me easily enough, at Joshua Unruh. I'm happy to field any superhero questions you might have, and who knows, it might even become a podcast unto itself. I'll also keep you in the loop on any fiction, articles, podcasts, or diatribes I cast out into the world, including my work at the Cinematropolis and for Pulp Diction Productions and Press.
Join us next time for Joker's Favor, where we see Batman and the Joker once again battling it off to see who owes who what favors first. And that's going to be episode 22 of the first season of Batman the Animated Series.
Until next time, we'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel. Animated Discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. And if you can't support us financially, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. It's the best way to help others discover the show. Keep up with Pulp Diction news by following at Joshua Unruh on Twitter, or find us at facebook.com/pulpdictionproductions. And a special thanks to Vinnie Hogan for our original theme music.